Good evening. We'll call this regular meeting of Council for Monday, June 9th, 2014 to order. I'll ask Council to consider the adoption of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda for the regular Council meeting of June 9th, 2014 be adopted and circulated and amended to include under correspondence for action, item 8B, letter of support. This is a request for a dialysis facility in Prince Rupert. And under additional items, item number 11, a NAV Canada position termination. And Mr. Mandrick, there's also a request to add the Westview Park property, parcel 4, lots 1 and 2.
Yes, Your Worship, if we could put that under correspondence for action as 8C.
Thank you. There's also one other item on here, which is increasing the tax ratio for heavy industry, but that has been deferred to staff. So with those additions and the one deletion, I'll ask Council to consider the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, that the agenda be adopted as circulated and amended to include. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. And next are minutes for the Council's consideration. There's 2 sets of minutes to be adopted, 1 to be received. The first one are the minutes of the special Council meeting of May 26, 2014. The request is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Next, for Council's consideration, are the minutes of the regular Council meeting of May 26, 2014, and the recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. And the third set are minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 26, 2014. The recommendation is they be received. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are also adopted. Or pardon me, received. Under petitions and delegations, we have Senior Vice President, Sales and Logistics for Pinnacle Renewable Energy Incorporated. And this is regarding their project here in Prince Rupert, and it's an update and to address various public concerns. Mr. Bassett, if you'd like to come forward, sir, make yourself comfortable there. I'd ask you when you're ready to press it'll be grayish green to your eye, and that'll allow the people that are watching at home on television to hear you.
Thank you. I'm ready. Thank you, Your Worship, members of the Council. I appreciate the time you've given me here to explain a little bit about where Pinnacle is, what we do. I'd like to take you through some of the process at both pellet making. I think it's an interesting business and not many people get the opportunity to look at it, so we can do that very briefly here just as a background. And then I'd like to take you through let's call it the life cycle of a pellet in the Westview plant, what happens to these things. And we're very aware of the community concerns and those we'd like to address at the end. So if I may, I'll start right off.
Certainly. Please go right ahead.
Pinnacle itself is based strictly in BC. Our head office is in Vancouver. We have an operational office in Prince George. Those big green dots you see over there are all of our plants, and the little blue dots, or they're supposed to be blue anyway, are various sawmilling activities around the province. And as you can see, we have a very symbiotic relationship with the sawmilling industry. In fact, we live from that sawmilling industry, and I'll explain that some more over here. Our game, our game is renewable energy, and what happens very briefly here is you have growth. New plants need carbon dioxide, sunlight, and a bit of water to grow, and some nutrients, obviously, from the soil. But what happens is these new plants absorb the carbon. That's the part that makes the wood, and eventually you get a mature tree developing here. Once it's mature, it doesn't do a very good job of capturing carbon from the atmosphere. So the sawmilling industry provides a great pathway to getting new growth into the forest. But the problem with sawmilling, I think, as we all know, is that it generates an awful lot of waste. It's that waste that we turn into pellets using these kinds of pellet plants, and I'll show you the process later. The wood pellets then are sold as fuel, mainly overseas at this point, and that fuel is renewable in the sense that once it's burned, carbon dioxide is liberated, and that then goes back into the process of fueling new growth forests around the world. And that renewable energy status is what gives is the basic premise and the business case for Pinnacle. Previously, all of that waste would have been burned up in these in burners such as these. As a beehive burner, and you can see that just a great amount of smoke and heat coming off there. Not very usable at all, mostly wasted. Also, a lot of the bush trimmings and thinnings and harvesting residues were burnt on site, simply because leaving them there creates some kind of a biohazard that may spontaneously combust and cause forest fires when you're not looking. Also, a feature of our forests is the beetle-killed wood over here. We can use that as fuel. We don't yet, but it's one of the things that we could be doing. So the picture now is that sawmilling residue comes to us. It comes to other industries too, to be fair, but a lot of it comes to the wood pellet business. A lot of these harvesting residuals too are able to be used as fuel by our plants. We grind them up on site. We haul the residues into the plants and we use them. Had we been using some of the beetle kill, of course, we would have seen a regenerated forest such as that on the right. Very quickly, and I'll take you through something in more detail just now, but the process that we use here is essentially you take a dry product and you hammer it and pelletize it. It's that simple. But once you get into wetter wood, you have to do some different techniques of hammering. You need to dry that product before it can get put into this pelletizing process. And similarly, the bush grind that you saw earlier, that too would require some grinding, an additional step before it comes into this system here. So very briefly, this is what it looks like. This is fiber being received at one of the plants. This is dry fiber, so it's very light. So you need this high cubic capacity kind of vehicle to bring it in, such as this walking floor here. It then gets hammered up and grinded. So this is a typical hammer mill. That's what it looks like. There's lots of stuff going on inside that you can't see there. And here's a grinding unit right over here, which takes bits of wood and larger pieces, grinds them up, and makes them available as raw material. If the product needs to be dried, what we've done up until now is we've used these rotating drum dryers, like you see here. So they spin around, they blast hot air through them, and the product comes out dry at the other end. And once it gets to pelletizing, essentially what happens here is you get the material feeds in through the middle of this unit. There's a circular die inside there which looks like this, and then the product is extruded from the inside out, comes out in the form of these pellets, is cut off by a knife to a certain size, and there you have the pellet. An important part of the process here is cooling it down. Now in winter time this is simple. You take air and blast it through the pellets and it cools it down pretty well. You need to cool it simply because it's a biomass, and therefore it does have the tendency to heat up, so that's an important process. It also hardens and makes the pellets more durable. And that is one of the keys to limiting the dust, because every time a pellet breaks, a little piece of dust gets generated here. Once you've cooled them, you screen them. This is not a picture out of focus. In fact, this is just a vibrating screen. And what you see there is pellets being moved forward and the fines dropping through the screen to the bottom to be recirculated. They move into this into the silo over here, And we have a limit with the CN of 100 tons per car. So we have a 100-ton load-out silo over there. We fill that up, we drop it into the rail car, and then it gets ready to go to the port. So you might have seen some of these rail cars knocking around, and they usually, unfortunately, are a bit more colorful than that, and they look more like this, which is shown here in the terminal dumping. So what we have here is we have a chap who he runs this machine, and he pokes it into the bottom of the discharge gate, rotates it, and the product flows out by gravity. Once it comes out of the rail car, it then gets lifted up with this bucket elevator and gets transferred into one of these transfer conveyors, and then into any one of these 4 silos where it sits and waits for a ship such as that one to come to the port, and then it's loaded through this loading mechanism here. We call it the ship loader, and straight into the hold. Once we get to the other side, typically it's discharged by these grabs, these mechanical grabs. So this mechanical grab, that's the crane that's operating the thing right here. It just goes into the hold, picks up a whole 11-ton load, and drops it into this movable hopper, which then feeds a truck. And there you can see the truck parked underneath it. That's the same truck discharging it into the customer's warehouse. And that's it. That's pellet making as simply as I can make it. Onto the Westview terminal. This is owned by Pinnacle and is being operated by Metroports, but we take full responsibility for this terminal. We're not trying to, show anything in the slide other than Metroports are a professional outfit who run the stevedoring operations on many ports, principally in the US. So this project was approved back in October 2012. Construction started soon afterwards, and our first shipment happened in January. The initial capacity of this plant is 50,000 tons, and it's the only dedicated wood pellet terminal in the world currently today that's capable of handling this full range of ocean-going bulk vessels. We have a pretty fast loading rate. We need it for the Rupert weather, so when we have breaks in the weather, we can load it as fast as we can. And that was the whole idea there. We have lots of built-in automatic equipment all over the place, heat sensors, IR sensors, and so on, one of which is the automatic sampling. And the whole system is really designed for gentle handling. So our purpose here is to try to keep these pellets as pellets and not as dust, because that's the most preferable and energy-dense way of transporting the product overseas. And what we've got here, and what I want to show you now, is that we've built this plant to the best available technology that there is today for noise and for dust containment. Now we know that there are some issues here. We're not blind to it, and we're very concerned about some of it, particularly the noise, and we'll talk about that just now. What Westview looks like today is exactly that. That's a picture from the water. And what you'll see is that there are 4 these big silos. Each of those is 12,500 ton capacity, and it's connected all up with bucket elevators and conveyors, and I'll take you through some of that detail. In the future, the plan is to put in an additional 2 silos in the south end, another silo in the north end, and that's all designed to give us the Panamax capability for which this thing was primarily designed. What happens is when we get the rail cars, as I said, we poke that machine that you saw earlier into that slot there, rotate it, it opens that gate, and the product just comes out with gravity. This was an area that we were very concerned about in the design. We figured that this, if anything, was going to cause the most dust. And so what we had installed in here in the grate are these flaps, you can call them, that once the product sits on top of them, the weight of the product pushes it down and opens them up, and once the product is finished flowing, those flaps self-close. And I have to say that this has been a remarkable success. We've seen very little dust coming from there. That is a discharge in action, as you can see it there. The whole secret to gentle handling, one of the secrets anyway, is to move the product very slowly and to ensure that the drops are not excessive. And what we've got here is we've got very wide but slow-moving conveyancing all through. So that pertains to the conveyors themselves, to the bucket elevators, and even the ship loader. And the whole system moves at somewhere around walking speed. One of the other best available technology design pieces is that all of these conveyors here, everywhere you see them, bucket elevators, transfer conveyors at the top, and even the conveyors underneath, are all entirely enclosed. So that was all to do with dust control. And again, I have to say that I think that part of it is working particularly well. The technology is not only restricted to what you can see, but also what you can't. And here's the inside of a silo. And what we've got going on here is a thing called a bean ladder. And what that does, it's got these little baffles. You can see little baffles in there, and it allows the product to flow down gently into the bottom of the silo. So that's about a 120-foot drop, and it flows in easily, and it doesn't create any breakages which would ultimately lead to dust. So this is a north-south view. East-west, it looks like that. We have these sloped floors, which allow for self-draining of the silo. You want to get them completely drained so that you get all of the particles out each time you go through a cycle of filling and draining it. Inside, you need very good eyesight for the slide, but you can see these little cables hanging down here. These are temperature monitoring cables, and what they do is this is right at the end of a silo draining exercise. So it's the only time you can open the door, which is why you still got some product left. But that's what the bean ladder looks like from the outside. And you can see the product would, wherever it comes down, it would pop out of that last hole into the pile. But the important part of this here is that flue that you see at the bottom there. It's full of little holes, and it's attached to what we call the aeration fan, and that's how we control the heat in these silos. We blow cold air through them, and that air migrates through the pile, cooling it down. At the top of the silo, you have these vents, so you've got all these vents around the periphery at the bottom here. You've also got these fan vents here. Now, the fan vents are mainly for moisture control or humidity control. There is a bit of moisture in the product, and what will happen, particularly when it starts heating up, is you lose that moisture. It condenses on the inside of the silo, and you have a phenomenon that's called silo rain. It literally rains inside of there. So you've got to pull that out, and the way to do that is to activate these fans. So those are the silo fans that we're talking about later on in this presentation. The other thing is these transitions between conveyors and silos, they're as short as we can get them, and inside of those two are these baffles that you saw in the bean ladder, all to help slow down the flow and minimize the chance of breakage and dust. We do, however, still get some dust suspended in the system, and how we deal with that is with what we call aspiration fans. This is a big one that's sitting on top of the ship loader, and what that does, it sucks up all the air inside the conveyor and then periodically injects whatever dust it's collected straight back into the flow so that you get the dust onto the ship. That is a live picture of the ship loader actually loading in a hold. Take note of the ship loader operator. You can see him quite clearly over there. There's dust. There is dust. You can see this little bit of dust kicking up here as the pellets roll down that slope. But all of that dust stays within the hold and is contained. And the reason why it's so good is if you look at this picture here, this is a picture of the innards of that very chute, which is really a series of buckets, and the product moves from one to the other, spilling from one to the other until finally it falls out the bottom. So the biggest drop you have there is really about a foot or so, and that's what keeps it pretty dust-free, plus the shrouding, of course, that goes around the side, and the skirt, which we'll mention a little bit later in this presentation. It's all pretty well linked up with, again, the best available process control equipment. The nice thing about this particular setup is it's interlinked, so whenever there's a stoppage anywhere, if the ship loader stops or one of these conveyors stops, it closes off all the necessary silo gates, or in this case, rail car gates as well, so that everything stops, nothing builds up anywhere, and you can get going again as quickly as possible. If you ever wondered what shiploading looks like of wood pellets in Vancouver, this is what it looks like. Again, you can see the man at the distance to him is the same as the other picture. This is all the dust that gets liberated, and the difference between our system and this is that in here the pellets simply free fall all the way to the bottom. That's the spout. They've got a skirt on it too, but it makes almost no difference. And it's literally because of the free falling action of those pellets creating such a dust storm down there. So that was the background. We have, as you're probably aware, 4 principal concerns, and I just want to take a moment here to say that there's been some, I think there's been some concerns expressed by the community that Pinnacle are taking no responsibility for this and no initiative and not doing anything about it. That couldn't be further from the truth, and hopefully when you see the plan that we've developed here and have been running with for some time now, you'll get a sense that we're all over this. Noise is our biggest concern, and I think it's a huge concern for the neighborhood too. We've heard it, we hear it all the time. It's much noisier than we had ever expected it would be. We've tried a number of things. Some have worked, some have not. But we'll get into the noise plan a little later on. Dust, on the other hand, I think is, as I say, is a bit of a success story. There's not much that needs to be done there, but we can't rest on our laurels. We know that, that we are always chasing perfection, and that we will be doing a lot of work here to make the dust situation even better than it is today. There's concerns about the wood smell, and I think to some extent that is manageable, and we'll get into a little plan about that. And there have been some concerns expressed about the community path and the promises that were made at the time that we put this plan together. So if we get straight into it now, firstly you need to know that that all of these issues are monitored by the Prince Rupert Port Authority. So they have, and you've probably seen it close to our site, they have a monitoring station there that's been fenced off, and it contains a bunch of very good equipment, some of which is quite unique in this area. One of them is this continuous particulate monitoring, and that monitors the small particles of dust. Then there are dust fall collectors, which monitor, let's say, the more visible dust. There's sound recorders, and we get access to a sound report every day, which I'll show you. There's video recorders all over the place, right high up, looking down over the ship loader, and they're very high resolution. And these are all linked into the port's operations center. And if they see a puff of dust, we get the call straight away. Fortunately for us, that has not happened too often. They also monitor down there the wind direction and speed, humidity, temperature, other climatic issues. Any dust analysis done by an independent third party, and as I say, we get the sound reports daily. Those sound reports look like that. It's a little bit hard to see. I apologize for that, but what it is it's the previous 24 hours, and what they've got here is they've got the actual sound level, as you can see, and then this is around about when we stopped working on this particular day, was June the 5th, and this is more or less ambient sound conditions down here, and the spikes are related to odd events like rail cars being maneuvered down in the yard, and what happens is whenever the sound peaks, they make a recording of it, does it automatically, and then the analyst can listen to this in the morning and report on what went on. So if you read his report here, which you probably can't, it says that spikes in there were mainly from nearby traffic or wildlife, with the exception of a couple of non-terminal related events, 2:45 midnight and 3:30 in the morning, which were due to rail. Okay. So we look at this, we pay attention to this, and we know exactly what we're doing when it comes to making a noise here. For dust measurement, I have to now refer to a different presentation, so if you give me a second. I think we just tap it right. Again, sorry about the small text here, but I will explain it to you. So there are two particulate matter measurements that we do. One is of a 2.5 micron, and the other is of a 10 micron. And the 2.5 is obviously, it's so small you can barely see it. In fact, I don't think you can see it. The 10 micron you can barely see. But these are all monitored by those machines down near us that have been installed by the port. They also, this is just the output of the day, so they also measure the wind speed and the direction. You can see here the gusting speed of the wind is that dotted line, the regular speed is this small solid line, temperature doing what you'd expect it to do, the humidity, and in this case the pressure too. But getting back to the particulate matter, the guideline that's set by the BC Air authorities is for particulate matter of 2.5 for a maximum of 25. Now that line there is 10. Okay, so you can see that we're well under any particulate matter concerns that we may have. For the PM10, which is the 10 micro, the guideline is 50. And again, this is sitting at and just above 10. So again, we don't have any concerns about that issue. Where we may have some concerns is on the bigger dust, and again, with your indulgence, I have to get out of this one somehow and into that one. So I want to start first on 2013, which is here. So we started monitoring this dust, what we call dust fall. Now this is visible dust, and the way it's collected is there are a series of canisters which are on top of poles. You might have seen them. They contain a solvent inside, and what happens is whatever dust falls in there is collected by the solvent and then sent away to the lab for them to inform us how much there was and more lately what it comprises of. Now on this big graph here, each of these lines represents the results of one of the sites. So site 1 is here, 2, 3, and 4, and that's the total amount of dust collected in each of the sites. The BC recommended limit here is 175, and with the exception of April, it's largely been below there. But all through this period, there was no more than construction going on. There was no operations itself. So we look at this as something of a baseline, with the caveat that we know there was construction going on, so that would have contributed to some of this dust. If you look at each of the site outputs here, again, there's barely discernible colors here, but the top one is the total amount of dust. The green one, which is in this case this one here, is what they call the variable content, and the blue one is what they call the fixed content. And essentially all those are respectively organic matter and inorganic matter. Inorganic matter is in this case mainly sand and dust of that nature, and organic matter is mainly pollen and insect parts and various other sort of bits of tree or whatever that might have fallen into the collector. Again, we weren't working at that point. So if you look at 2014 now, what you do see is an alarming increase, also based in and around April here. So it's a similar profile. And what we've got here is we've got results for the early part of the year, from January onwards, and then this great big increase in April. Unfortunately, we don't have May results because somebody took down the canisters, and so we've replaced them now. So we will get June, but we do have a gap in our knowledge in May. On each of the sites, if you differentiate now between the inorganic and the organic matter, you can see that the inorganic, this blue mark here, is pretty high. So we know that at and around that period, things got pretty dry, and there was a lot of dust blowing around. So I mean that makes sense. But there's also a spike here on the inorganic side, and that's the one that worries us, at least on the organic side, and that's the one that worries us, because that could potentially be pellet dust. So what we've done recently is we've started collecting samples of dust and having it analyzed for its content, and the results have been rather interesting. We had a case, it was around about the 17th of May, when there were reports that there was wood pellet dust all over one of the creeks down there. So the PRPA went and collected some samples. I had a look at the stuff, and I have to say that even I thought that could have been wood pellet dust. So we had it analyzed, and the results were quite surprising. We found that that of that particular case, 80% of it was pollen from pine, 10% of it was pollen from other species, 5% was insect parts, and 5% was other organic matter. There was zero wood pellet dust there. So that was interesting. But it doesn't let us off the hook, because we took another sample of dust that had fallen on the on you can call it the roof of one of the monitoring machines, and in there was 40% wood pellet dust, and again 40% pollen. That dust, however, had been around for a while, and there was no real correlation to anything. But again, it's information that we now have that we didn't have before. So there we go. So what are we doing about all this? Well, for noise mitigation, which I think everybody will agree is the number one issue here. There's a number of things that we're looking at here. Firstly, stopping all rail operations and shuttling by 10 o'clock every night. That's already in place. That's already happening. All noisy plant maintenance is only now conducted on day shift. That's already in place too. We're running the silo fans. If you remember, I pointed them out earlier. These are the moisture fans at the top of the silos. We run them as sparingly as we can and as time sensibly as we can. I don't think we had a true appreciation of just how much noise those things made in the past. And there's a couple of things that we can do with that too. So the one part is to investigate putting on what they call variable frequency drives on these fans, which would essentially allow them to run slower, but we could maybe run them for longer and still achieve the same result. So you're hopefully not causing a nuisance in the community, but you're still able to do the job that they were designed to do. Wherever we can, if there's noisy machinery that comes on site, and this is mainly contractors, think of compressors and such equipment, we locate them on the water side of the silos. We're looking at a plan to, and we're busy designing it right now, to put a gangway in there, and that will eliminate that annoying sound of the man lift, which you probably hear sometimes in the night. It is shielded by the silos, but it's still noisy. We're thinking about putting some shrubbery around there, some trees. We need some natural kind of sound abatement. There probably always were trees there, and they might need to go back. We'll have to look at that. The most disappointing part of this whole exercise has been that we were sold a system that would essentially deflect the noise from what has been proven to be the most noisy piece of equipment we have, and those are the motors on top of the bucket elevator. So two things about that. One, they were completely unshrouded, and two, they're right at the level, I think, where they project most strongly into the community. So we figured, okay, if we could get rid of that sound, we'd be doing some good stuff. But those sound abatement structures, we've put them up now, and none of us can really, say that they're working. So we've got those people coming back in. They should have been here last week. They'll probably be here next week, but they've got a job to do to make sure that they live up to their guarantees of sound reduction on that system up there. This here, it was an idea. It's turning out to be somewhat impractical, requesting vessels or quieter power generators, simply because there's no metric, there's no measure, and when you order a ship in, nobody can tell you how quiet or how noisy those things are. So we'll continue pushing on that, but I'm not sure that there'll be much success. There is another noise that I think the community is well aware of, and that's the chattering noise. I think it's been described as best, and that really is product hitting the receiving chute as it's flung over the top of the bucket elevator. And I think we can do something there with either lining it or shielding it. It's a very inaccessible spot in the whole system. So it's going to take some work, and it's going to take a lot of engineering, but we think that'll make a big difference. And then we've already had meetings with members of the community input group arranged through the PRPA, and one of their good ideas was, hey, speak to the PRG. They've been doing this for a while. They've also got some mitigation issues, and they may be able to point you in the right direction for some assistance. So we'll certainly do that. For dust, we're going to do a number of things here. This is not going to really improve anything, but we need it because we've got to get at any dust that does collect or build up in the conveyors. It comes with a lot of housekeeping diligence, which is a training issue, and I think we're on that one. The ship loader, when we start loading, because it's a concertina shroud, a lot of water collects in there, so you've got to actually extend it fully and to get rid of the water. And what happens often is that somebody opens the valve at the bottom by mistake and dumps a whole bunch of product into the ocean. So again, it's a training issue, but on top of that, we've now learned to open this over a bin just in case, and to catch it that way. I showed you the skirt earlier on the ship loader, and one of the tricks to minimizing dust here is to make sure that skirt is always in contact with the power. Again, a training issue, and I think that's been pretty successful. You don't see more than those very small puffs now that we saw in the slide here. We have already tamper-proofed dust collectors, so we made them more difficult to steal. We're going to apply dust suppressant on the roadway, and I think that we'll probably find that'll drop the inorganic fraction quite significantly. There is a 20-kilometer speed limit on that road, and quite often we see people shooting up and down there at much more than that and creating quite big dust clouds. So we've got to clamp down on that too. We have taken, again, a couple of comments from the community about, putting filters on the silo fans, and we've had a look at this. I don't think it's all that practical to do. In actual fact, what we believe now is it's probably better if we blanked off the town side fans. In other words, we only used 6 of the 12 at any one time, and only those that were facing out to the ocean. So again, not only is it dust mitigation, but noise too. And then on top of that, we're still looking at this variable speed idea to reduce the speed and reduce the noise accordingly. And then there's some practical issues. I mean, is there any reason to vent the silos on a weekend? It's particularly nice weather, people are outside. All you're really going to do is create a nuisance. So we're clamping down on that, and also on aeration at low silo levels, which means if the silo level is particularly low, the air shoots through there at a high speed, causing dust inside the silo, which spits it out the top. So nowadays we're pretty careful about what level we will aerate at. Onto the wood smell mitigation. The best idea we can come up with here is to find a way to connect a wind direction device with limit switches and so on to only allow the aeration where it has to happen to be activated when the wind is blowing from a particular direction. So, it sounds like something that can be done. We haven't found the right technology yet, but we're looking for it. Inside the conveyors, you have a number of those a number of points where the cooling air comes in, and those are all connected individually to a fan. So we're looking at minimizing the number of fans that we can run to achieve the same degree of cooling in the silo. And again, that's in the experimentation stage right now. It's been started, so we'll figure it out in due course. Again, is there any need to aerate on a weekend? I think we've done that. I've been here that particular weekend. It was a beautiful day out, and what did we do? We had an onshore wind and we aerated the silo, and the entire community caught the smell of wood pellet dust. So that wasn't sensible. That's not even practical, and we can pretty much avoid doing that. We keep coming back to this idea. It's going to limit the wood smell too if we can slowly discharge the humidity from these silos using that variable speed idea. And of course, again, an improved degree of diligence when it comes to cleanup. The community path, the PRPA has really been the champion for this, and they had an idea to have a path in the Quinitza area. I think it's getting a lot of resistance from various parties, and it's not something that they've given up on, but they are considering establishing an alternative. I've said near Cow Bay, but that's probably entirely incorrect. It's really going to be subject to, I think, their analysis. But one thing we are committed to, and that is we will be contributing financially to whichever one it is as it transpires. So finally, if I could leave you with this message, we're not planning to go anywhere. We therefore want to be good neighbors, and we're going to be doing the best we can to get through this plan and to hit on all of those points of dust, noise, and smell. We will also put more measurement points out in the community, just to make sure that we do understand where the dust is coming in, and what the dust comprises of. Is it indeed pollen, or is it wood, or what's it? We need to understand the science so that we can come to the right conclusions and find the best solutions. One thing I'm hot on is to hold a community walkthrough sometime in July or August. We want people to come down there. We want them to come and have a look at the place. We're very proud of it. We think it works particularly well, and we'd like to be neighborly in that regard, and so the invitation is out there. And always, we welcome constructive ideas on mitigation. We don't know all the answers. Some people have worked in and around these kinds of products for a long time, and if you have some good ideas, we're all ears. We want to make this work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the detail which you went through. You've identified the concerns that the citizens have. There isn't a member of council nor a staff member here tonight that hasn't had complaints or concerns expressed, particularly for the dust. And some people are well aware of that dust and how much harm it can create. And people get very alarmed when they see dust on top of the silos.
Yeah. We get alarmed too. I mean, it's not something that it's not engineered to do that. But you know, we're very serious about attacking these things, and we're going to take them. We're going to take them one by one and hopefully deal with them.
The time frame.
It's you know, some of the stuff is done already. We all in favor of continuous improvement. There are issues, and they are not issues. There are potential other solutions that we haven't even thought about yet. So you know, I would say that we're still going to be commissioning this plant as we intended for the whole of this year. I'd like to believe that by the time we get to the end of it, we'll have most of these things under control.
We were initially told in conversation that it would take about 6 months to commission this.
Well, you know, one of the areas that we thought we were going to get on top of quickly was the sound. That didn't happen. And you know, we were even delighted by the fact that you know, we got the sound abatement structure in there at the end of April when that was supposed to be done by June. But as you are aware, it's not working as it was intended. So there's more work to be done, and it's really difficult, you know, for us who don't understand sound to come up with a decent time frame and say, well, that's when it's going to be done. So I think you know, the best answer I can give you is that it's got the full focus of Pinnacle.
Well, I appreciate that. You can also understand that people have homes in that area, and the last 6 months, in terms of Pinnacle's growing pains, have not been pleasant. And we have people, of course, who like to leave their windows open a little bit while they sleep at night.
Yeah.
And some of them report a continuous hum. And of course, as you alluded to, the houses that are up higher are impacted more in a negative way.
Yeah.
However, there's other members of council here. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Path, for your informative presentation. I would like to ask one question. We were told in the beginning that there would be a couple of vehicles specially equipped to be driving around at all times testing this. Are they out there?
You'll have to press your button there.
Oh, sorry. I think I know where that comes from. And that was in the early days, the Prince Rupert Port Authority did not have that little farm of equipment that they have today. And so the specialized equipment was, in fact, particulate matter monitoring, but mobile monitoring equipment. And I think that's now been replaced by what they have in the farm.
Councillor Garon, then Councillor Ashley, then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. In regard to the monitoring, I remember when Mr. Cook came from the port to explain how the monitoring would work. I do remember the monitoring would be done on the site, and I remember questioning him about shouldn't it be around the neighborhood, and I don't think the port was doing that or if they had any intention of doing that, because I did mention that we were concerned if the wind was blowing in certain directions that it wouldn't just might not land on your property, but it could land somewhere else. So I'm really not clear on exactly what was done in the beginning, but if that's going to be happening in the future, I think it should be done soon.
I'll certainly take it up with the port. I mean, I think it's a valid issue.
Councillor Ashley.
Well, I've got a number of things. I'm going to talk about the dust issue first, because while I understand what you're saying, and thank you for your presentation, very detailed, and I'm glad to see that you guys are thinking of different mitigation strategies. That's always good to look at. But I've seen pictures and seen the areas down there, and there are times when dust is blowing around there. So I understand while maybe some of the things haven't been caused perhaps by the pellet plant, there have been like some issues with the dust. And I guess from my perspective on council is during the EA process, we were told, and we were told again and again, there will be no dust, because it was one of the big things that people were very concerned about. In fact, noise wasn't even on anybody's radar. It's obviously a bigger concern now, but dust was the big one, because they, of course, have seen the operations, which are different operations in the, like, you know, Williams Lake and those places where there's all sorts of dust in the air. And so I guess what I wanted to put out there, I'm not trying to say you guys aren't trying to work on things, but there is a concern when you're told one thing and then something else happens. Now, I think that I do agree that throughout like the process, most of the dust seems to be contained, and there's been a lot of effort, I think, put into trying to make it contained as possible. But I just wanted to make clear that whether or not the dust containers are collecting it or not, I've seen pictures, I've been down there, I've seen the dust swirling around the ship, so it does happen sometimes. I don't know what the reasons are, but I know that it's happening sometimes. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and I'm sure that the employees have probably told you that. One, you were saying about ideas for mitigation strategies, and I do not know if this is something that would work, but one thought that came to me, especially when you were showing the picture of the guy loading and with the skirt coming down and just the little puffs of dust, is that when it does get really windy or rainy here, the wind can blow in and might even be blowing into the hold and pulling dust up or out of the air. So I was wondering, you were talking about as a noise mitigation strategy of putting some sort of shell over top of the loading container. I'm wondering if that is something that could be done in terms of, you know, perhaps controlling the dust a little bit. So that's my first question.
Thank you for the question. I think it was an area that we looked at in the beginning, and the area was not really around that, but it was around, do we want to have the ability to load in the rain, which amounts to the same thing. So at the end of the day, what we decided was that there are indeed bits of equipment that we can use here, and how it works is that the hold, when it's closed, has these access doors in them. They're round hatches actually, and you can get what amounts to a giant funnel that you put into this hole, and it widens up to the width of the ship loader, and then that can be shrouded over, right? So the problem with that is that the product then falls from the top of the hold all the way to the bottom without going through any slowing down process, and you end up with exactly the kind of picture that I showed you earlier. With
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt there. So I'm just trying to remember when the EA process, like I remember that they showed us a video and they showed us how the pellets would come into this, you know, thing with the skirt, and then it would go down and, you know, they'd maybe drop like 6 inches. It was like to mitigate the dust problem. I thought that particular, whatever it is, I don't know what you call it, but I thought that
the chute.
Sorry, the chute. So I thought that could actually go down to the bottom of the hold and then be slowly raised up so that wouldn't happen. Are you saying that if they were to somehow shroud it, they wouldn't be able to put it down?
Yes. So that's exactly what happens when the hold is opened. That chute goes all the way to the bottom, and it, you know, as you're loading, so it adjusts automatically to the top. But if you're trying to load in the rain, or if you're trying to prevent wind from getting there, which amounts to the same thing, you will close the hatch, and you will go through a ancillary hole in the top of the hatch, and that big chute will not fit in there. So you have to go through a funnel arrangement with it, which then just drops it from the top to the bottom.
Okay, thank you. That answers that question. My second question has to do with the smell, and I've got two parts to the question. I know that you said that it's usually happening during, or as far as you know, happening during the aeration process. And I'm wondering, first of all, if you could tell us exactly like what it is that people are smelling. And I guess the second thing would be you were talking about perhaps aerating when the wind is blowing offshore, or so that it doesn't come to the community. And I'm wondering, is it possible that aeration process, could something be built so that it was in a closed system so that that actual air would never actually go outside of that system, but still manage to aerate the silos?
The answer is I don't know, but I think it would be unlikely because the aeration needs to go through the whole pile of stored material. So what the smell is really compressed wood. There's nothing, there's no additives, there's no binders, it's pure wood that you're smelling there. And I guess because it's compressed, perhaps it's it's stronger than you wouldn't smell this table, for example. So there's nothing harmful about it, and that goes for the dust too. There's far more dust in the sawmill, and there's far more everything else in the sawmill than you will ever find here. But we still recognize it as a nuisance factor, and it's that we're trying to knock on the head.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my last question for now, I guess, would be you were talking about the waterfront area, and I know that the port has looked at areas like in the Cowbay area to like mitigate the fact that the proposed path and that sort of thing wasn't possible. But I guess my question, and I've said this before, and we've had conversations at council and have sent letters requesting CN to come and talk with us, because I know that that is the big obstacle in terms of they're the ones that own that property, so they're the ones who have control over that. My question would be that if we were to manage to get CN to come to a meeting with us, would you guys be willing to come and talk about what we could do there?
You need to remember we need CN probably more than most people do. So it puts us in a difficult position. We are effectively leasing some tracks from them. And as you rightly point out, they do hold all the cards here. And we have I would say that we have tried quite hard to get various proposals, not just the pathway, through them. It's not an easy task, and I think personally, if you brought a company like CN into a forum such as this, and you try to pressure them into some kind of a decision, I think it would probably go against us.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, one thing, wood dust. It is dangerous. Parts per million. Wood dust is dangerous. If you look up an MDS sheet just on wood dust, parts per million are just about 0. Secondly, you talk about stopping your ship loading at 10 p.m., your rail loading noise at 10 p.m., but you don't mention anything about ship loading. And there's been numerous times when you've loaded through the night, and from what I understand, you've asked special permission from the port to do that because of weather conditions. Well, weather conditions in Prince Rupert are probably not what you would like to have for wood pellet loading, so you're going to be continuing to load through the night. Or you say in your control of noise progression in your EA that you will only work during weekday hours. But now you're working way past a weekday hour. Work day to me is 8 to 8, 7 to 7. I think the local people would even put up with 9 or 10 o'clock. But, loading through the night is not a workday hour. That's the noise problem, and it seems the noise is more predominant during loading. Although I don't live in the neighborhood, and I've been down there a few times and heard it when there's no loading. Micron 2.5, you get enough of it, you still get dust. It doesn't matter how fine it is, if you accumulate it, there's dust. I agree with you, there's a bit of organic material down there, cedar pollen and everything else, but I don't know of any testing done on people's balconies, their car hoods, their windowsills. You know, these are the people living in the neighborhood. It's their quality of life that's being affected. You know, they go out on a balcony, you know, and unfortunately, we're going to start getting more and more nice weather in Rupert, believe it or not, and people want to start using their balconies and that. And this is why a lot of this stuff is coming to the forefront right now, because people are getting out in their yards and their balconies and that, want to barbecue and that, and they're seeing this layer of dust. And whether it's being tested on the ground or up in the air, I don't know. And I really think some of this testing should be done at the higher levels.
Thank you. It's such a multifaceted question, but let me try and deal with the dust first. I think that as we learn, and in our quest, you know, to really be doing the right things, to putting in the right technology and finding the right solutions, one of the things that we have committed to doing here is putting in more collection points around the neighborhood so that we understand it, so that we can also test what that dust is and where it potentially is coming from. I mean, it's pointless trying to seal up something that could potentially be sealed if that's not the real issue here. So we really need to understand it, and you know, we're committed to doing that. As far as the noise is concerned, I'm not very familiar with the EA process. My apologies. I wasn't really around then. But what I do know is that we have the ability to load ships from 8 in the morning till 1 a.m. That's what we have as a operating window. So what we have done is we have voluntarily stopped rail car discharging, which makes a noise by banging cars around, and you know, also that what we call the shuttle wagon that moves cars up and down, that can also be noisy at night. So you know, that's the step that we've taken that I showed you earlier. But we don't really have any intention of limiting ourselves to daytime hours of loading, and I'm not sure where that comes from. I would need to check it out. Yeah.
It says Westview Terminal operating schedule will be designed to concentrate throughout during weekday working hours. Right there in control of noise. It's your words, not mine.
Okay, well, I'll certainly check that up, and you know.
Another thing on your, you know, there's enough walking trails in Cow Bay already. I would like to see Pinnacle concentrating on Moresby Park, Rustwood Trail, places that have to be developed. You know, like you can go out and take the initiative to do this on your own. You don't need to work with the port on some of these projects. The other thing you keep saying we are going to test, is the port testing or are you testing?
The port is responsible for collecting the data, but it's for us. I mean, it's our data. We just have them there as an independent third party, you know, from the whole chain of custody and what would you call it, credibility point of view. I think it's important. But the tests themselves are also done by an independent lab. I mean, it's not us doing it, though.
I should think it would be better handled if you were involved in the testing, so you could talk to the actual people in the neighborhood. You're the corporation, you're the one that has to make these people happy. The port seems to be running interference for you and doing the testing, and possibly if you did the testing yourself, you would have the results faster and also be able to communicate with these people and find out some of the solutions to the problems quicker.
We'll certainly take that on board. I mean, our plan, our desire is to get to the bottom of this quickly. That's what it is. And if that's what it's going to take, then we'll certainly look at it.
One other point, the ventilation...
Last comment, Councillor.
Okay, the ventilation fans at the top are for removing moisture in the silos, correct? why couldn't you put some sort of dehumidifying process in there so you wouldn't even be venting the fans, you would just be removing the moisture?
Again, these are the kinds of ideas that we can look at. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll ask you to come back yourself or another representative of Pinnacle Renewable Energy. I've got you, Councillor Ashley. But I want to have you understand this. We'd like to have you come back September 30th and give us an update and see what improvements have been made. Because it's a great amount of inconvenience, and we can't have it go on indefinitely. Councillor Ashley, then Councillor Cunningham.
So just kind of following up, and I know that this is putting you on the spot, and you're not necessarily the one that was involved in the EA process, but right now you're the representative for the company. So it's not necessarily directed at you. It's just trying to I guess, put out what the feelings of the community are with regards to this, because I think it's important that the company knows that. We were told a lot of things during the EA process, made a lot of promises to the community about things like dust and noise and other things. And while I understand that there are certain things that you're not aware of in the EA process, it is very frustrating to the people of the community to be told one thing during the process where, all of the environmental things are all being done, and then to find out that things aren't the case. So I appreciate that the mitigation strategies are there, but I guess the question that I would have, and I know Mayor Musalem also kind of asked this, I know that timelines is something that people are going to be interested in. They're going to want to know, like, they've got the list of things that you're planning to do, and I'm sure they're like, okay, sounds like they're going to do something, but people are going to want to know when and how soon, because the fact is that while we all understand that there's a commissioning process and there's training process and all these things, I feel that the people of Prince Rupert have already been very, very patient, and I think in order to continue to have that patience, even though it's growing thin, not break, would be to give them some things like, these are the things we're going to do now, these are the things we're planning on, these are the things we're working on, because I think they deserve to know what that is. And I'm not saying that you might not know that now, but the sooner that we have some ability to tell the people in our community that, the better off I think it would be for everyone.
I agree. And I think that, the idea of getting back here at the end of September for a, let's call it an update and see where we are, is a solid idea, and I'll certainly do that. Yeah, I mean, we have mitigation plans, and, hopefully by then, more of them than not will be implemented, and we'll take it from there.
Councillor Thorkelson.
Yeah, I also echo the rest of Council's disappointment with Pinnacle regarding the promises made during the EA process and the outcome of the first months of loading those vessels. And I think that's it's a concern to us, because there are lots of other projects that are going on. You yourself, talked about you wanting to expand Pinnacle, which, if the dust problems and noise problems aren't resolved, means more dust and more noise. And if we can't trust the EA process to deliver what was promised in the EA process, then we have an EA process at Campotex, we have an EA process at LNG plants. It becomes something that you start wondering what the process is for. But to begin with, if people make promises that they maybe had intentions of living up to, or thought they could live up to, or new technology, and this is what we've been told it will do, and then it doesn't happen, what's the recourse? Obviously, to ask you to move, to tear things down, to move out of town. That's not very, it's not going to happen, but that's how people are feeling, because they say, we are promised this through the EA process, and you haven't delivered. And we don't care why you didn't deliver, but we were said no dust, no noise, and that's sort of what people expect. Now, I do think that you need to talk with the port, because the port did, I checked my notes, and the port did promise that they were going to have this mobile unit that Councillor Garon and Councillor Ashley were talking about. And the mobile unit, it was asked at this council if that mobile unit could move from one part of town to another part of town just on this with the sake of a phone call saying, you know, it's really dusty over here. Can you bring your equipment over here now? And that equipment would move there. So I understanding you're putting up these number of measuring devices. And I guess what's the question is still is, does the port still have that equipment? And can you maybe ask the port if they can start doing what they promised to do to us when we were discussing the possible dust problem, and saying that they could move around what they said, and if they found any dust, they would speak to you strongly, and your operations would stop until the dust problem was resolved. That's what they said at that time. And we haven't seen that happen, and I know that they're saying you're just being commissioned. But that's what the port said at the time. So I mean, I think that they need to maybe be helping you a little bit more, because they certainly want to sell that project your project to this community. So, you know, that I think what was promised, what Councillor Cunningham read in the EA, and also what was said publicly and what was said at this council meeting, is not what people are experiencing. And I guess that's my statement. My question to you. Sorry about that, but my question is, have you seen the pictures? Have you been getting the emails that people have shown you or sent to, they say they've sent them to Pinnacle, they certainly sent them to us, about billows of clouds of dust coming out of your operation? Because if you haven't seen them, I'm sure somebody here with their computer can email them to you so that you've seen them. But it is not just a little bit of dust, it's clouds of dust on certain days, and we have the emails that have been sent to us, and the pictures were sent to all of us.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
So if you don't have them, we'd be more than happy to send them to you, and maybe you're not aware of how bad it does look from our point of view, and then if they're not getting to you, then maybe if the port isn't forwarding to you because they said they've been forwarded to the port, then maybe we could have a direct place for us to forward those pictures to you. If that's what we are receiving, we'd be more than happy to forward them to you, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. So to answer the question, yes, we've seen them. We get pretty much all of the feedback through the channel that's been established, and I think that's working fine. What do I think about those clouds of dust? Not very happy thoughts. I mean, this is why we are engaged in doing what we're doing here. We've taken this issue very seriously. You know, as I said earlier, our intention is to be good neighbors, and you can't be good neighbors if you're doing those kinds of things. So we understand it. We're sympathetic to it. We're apologetic for it, and you know, I think what message I would like you all to take from this is that you know, we have been and will continue to take strides to get to the bottom of it all. Now, I know that all sounds all nice, but as you rightly pointed out, it probably needs a follow-up so that we can put those statements to the test, and I'm up for that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming here this evening.
All right.
Councillor Ashley.
Just one more question, because there are a lot of citizens that, you know, are concerned and may even have ideas. As you said, you're open to sort of constructive ideas for how things might be settled. I'm just wondering if there's any plan of maybe meeting with some of the concerned citizens just as an information gathering session, saying, do you have any ideas? Or if there's something along those lines that could be arranged where people could actually ask questions. So it's just a question for you.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I was hoping that our sort of open day walkthrough would be a good forum for that, but perhaps not everybody can make it down there. And yeah, it's certainly something that we'll try and put together.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, have you got any final comments?
Maybe on the walkthrough, you can do it on a Sunday when most people have the day off, and you could have a somewhat of a public forum or a barbecue. I don't know what'll be barbecued, but it's a suggestion.
That was the plan. Sometime on a weekend, yeah.
Thanks again. We appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
See you at the end of September. I'll ask council to move on to reports and recommendations. There's a report, item A is a report from the city manager, and it's the appointment to the Mainland Solid Waste Management Committee. The recommendation is that Richard Pucci, engineering coordinator, be appointed to the Mainland Solid Waste Management Committee as per bylaw number 245 for Skeena Queen Charlotte region, for the Skeena Queen Charlotte Regional District. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Garon. Councillor Garon, you had a comment?
Do we only have one person sitting from the city on that board?
Mr. Long?
Yes, I believe that's it.
Are we allowed to have more than one? Two?
And
I would like to sit on that if anybody else doesn't want to.
okay, I guess Tanya is already on it. I didn't realize that.
So we do have 2 city staff
Yes, we
members,
do.
right? Okay. Apparently it's in the report. Oh, that's fine. Any further discussion on this matter? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Next is a report from the Chief Financial Officer, and it concerns the 2013 Statement of Financial Information. It comes with a recommendation that Council by resolution approve the 2013 Statement of Financial Information. And Mrs. Bombin, before you get there, I'll direct you to, in your report it says page 5 of 15, and it's the schedule of elected officials' remuneration and expenses. And if you check that, you'll see that Councillor Garon's last name is spelled incorrectly. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for noting the error. My apologies, Councillor Garon. Every year, the city must prepare the Statement of Financial Information, and it requires council approval first before we can actually submit it and have it available for public. Most of the information that must be presented is contained in the annual audited financial statements. Additional information requirements include a schedule showing the remuneration and expenses incurred on behalf of all elected officials, a schedule showing the salaries and expenses incurred on behalf of all employees earning $75,000 or more, and a schedule showing the payments made to all vendors who are paid $25,000 or more. The Statement of Financial Information for 2013 has been completed in accordance with the Act, and all we require now is for Council to approve.
Councillor Garon.
I'll move that we approve the 2013 Statement of Financial Information.
Seconded by Councillor Ashley. Moved by Councillor Garon, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Councillor Ashley.
Just again wanted to thank Ms. Bombin for a good report. I know it's required, but it's still well done. And I also just wanted to let people know again, this is another place where you can find out information about city finances.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, please go ahead.
Can I ask a naive question? What are the councillors' expenses consist of?
They would be expenses when councillors go to the UBCM or some other meeting as directed here and as allowed for in the annual budget. So it's really the apportionment of costs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's nothing further, I'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. Next is correspondence for action. There's a request for a letter of support, and this is from the Helijet company. It concerns their Prince Rupert base, and there's a recommendation that Council send a resolution supporting Helijet's public viewing and flyover at this year's Seafest. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Garon. Pardon me, Cunningham. Mr. Long, can you provide some background on this, please, for the people watching at home?
Yeah, Your Worship, is pretty straightforward. They're required to come and get our permission before they do flyovers.
Right. Thank you. We'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Next is a request for a letter of support, and it's from Ms. Baines, and it's a request for a dialysis facility in Prince Rupert, British Columbia. Comes with a recommendation that Council send a resolution supporting Ms. Baines' request for a dialysis facility in Prince Rupert. I'll ask Council's consideration of the matter. Councillor Cunningham.
I'll forward the motion, but one thing I'd like to add to it, I'd like to also have the letter forward to the Northwest Regional Hospital Board that Nelson Kinney and I sit on, so we can bring this forward to them at our next meeting. And I'd also like the regional district to receive a letter asking for their support in this matter also.
Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Next, there is a report regarding the Westview Park property. That property is legally described as Parcel 4, Lots 1 and 2. Mr. Long, would you please explain the report? I read it. I immediately asked staff for a map because when you read it, it's not abundantly clear except to the writer of the letter or the report. But we do have the maps here, so if you want to use one of these to explain it, you're certainly welcome to.
Certainly, Your Worship. Subsequent to the public discussion about what is called Chapter 59, which is a fairly old requirement to actually attach the original public criteria for all the property that was deeded in the 50s to the city of Prince Rupert, and that public property was deeded with certain stipulations that it had to be used in a particular way, mostly public uses. Subsequently, there was a number of parcels, and for some unknown reason, this particular parcel, that particular requirement was not put on title. And we think it's likely because the parcel between the conversation of starting the conversation about all the parcels, this subsequent parcel was subdivided into two different lots. So in fact, the parent parcel was supposed to have this covenant on it, but then subsequently there was a passage of time and it ended up being parcel 1 and 2 of a different plan number, and that's probably the likely reason why the covenant that was on the other parcels weren't put onto these particular parcels, and this particular group of neighbors would like the city now to go ahead and put Chapter 59's requirements onto lots 1 and 2, which were before, I think, lot 16.
So, Mr. Long, if you look at the diagram there, Lot 1 is the Westview Elementary School. So the city doesn't have control of that. School District number 52 has control of that. So we'd actually be imposing on them.
Well, we'd have to ask them, Your Worship, whether or not they're prepared to do that. We do have control of Lot 2.
You're asking council to consider doing that.
Yes, actually, the neighborhood is asking council to consider that.
The other thing that the neighborhood's asking, just so it's abundantly clear to the council, is that if you're looking at this and you see Lot 2, they're also asking that when you put that restrictive covenant on Lot 2, that we couldn't do anything with the vacant service lot, which used to contain the transition house. Nor could we do anything with the property next door to that, which also, I believe, has been used through the Community Enrichment Society for a program for, at one time, mothers and children. Councillor Ashley.
So just a question on that part, as that wasn't clear to me in this, but I just could be reading it incorrectly. So I'm just wondering, with the covenant of whatever Chapter 59 puts on this, does that mean that it's just can be used for parkland, or those two parcels, for example, that used to have community use buildings on them, could community use types of things still happen on those lots, I guess is the question that I have, according to if we put Chapter 59 on this title?
Yes, I believe there were public uses permitted within Chapter 59. The other alternative is to complete the subdivision by subdividing those two particular parcels off of the parent parcel and then just putting the covenant on the parent parcel and excluding those two. But there are a number of options that we could consider, but certainly the neighborhood would like us to do it on all of Lot 2. That's what they requested.
Councillor Garon.
I think we've all got a lot of questions, and it just kind of landed on our lap tonight. So if staff could do up a report about some options or scenarios, or maybe
Like that, to make that a motion, please?
Yeah, I'm going to make that a motion because I think we need more information right now, and I don't know if it's completely available to us at this point in time. I know Mr. Long has great knowledge, but maybe we need to delve into a few things to make sure we're doing the right thing if we do make a decision. So.
Councillor Ashley. Thank you. Certainly, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason I second that is, I think we know a lot about the information about these lots because we've had it before us and we've talked about whether or not we should put a development on there, and we heard very clearly from the community that that was something that they didn't really want to happen. But I think what the information that we really need is the stuff about those other two lots, and maybe if there's options in terms of subdividing it, if that's something we want to do. And then the other thing would be what Mayor Musela mentioned at the beginning with regards to the school district, because I'd rather than voting on this in 3 different types of motions, I'd rather just do it all at the same time, and that would give time to ask the school district whether or not they're in accordance with putting that agreement on the lot and those sorts of things. So,
thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
I thought this was a done deal and that Chapter 59 was just it wasn't put on this, but it's legally binding that it should be on this. Does this go back to 1965?
Mr. Long.
Yeah, the conclusion that Bill Horn arrived at was that this has likely been an oversight, and in fact, Chapter 59 is still operative with respect to this piece of property.
Councillor Cunningham.
So if that's the case, it's a done deal. It's just a matter of us adding it to the covenant, and whether the school district owns it or the city owns it, Chapter 59 is in effect on this property.
Mr. Long.
Well, that's what Mr. Horn concluded. I'm not sure that that's the complete legal opinion with respect to that, but certainly on the face of it, it certainly looks that way.
Well, if this motion is adopted, then you'll get a legal opinion. Okay. That satisfies you, Councillor Garon? There's no further discussion. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, I think that I'm in agreement with Councillor Cunningham. I think Mr. Horn made that conclusion, and I guess we would have to talk to the school board, but I would think that was an error, and it should have been on there in the first place. There's nothing that we did that could remove that legislation. That legislation could only be changed by the government who made the legislation, which was the government of British Columbia. So we do whatever we want, but we can't change the government of British Columbia's piece of legislation unless they themselves change that legislation. And if you look in here, we wrote the government, and they said that, as I look, there's a package that we received on this, which is like half an inch thick, and it was a lot of work that Mr. Horn did, right? And to ignore it would be not to have read it. I found it extremely interesting. Of course, I haven't committed it to memory, as I'm sure some of the people in Prince Rupert have committed it to memory, but I can't exactly tell you on page 48 what's on it, but I can read it. And it says they're talking about interest in all 17 parcels, and it says our review has failed to provide any reasons for the ministry to deviate from the position put forward in our correspondence dated August 23rd, 1983. The province's interest does not restrict the property owners from developing the land and provides assurances to the public that these parcels will continue to be used for public purposes. And so, and that's what the RCMP is on land that's under this, and we have a building there. Libraries on land that's under the same covenant. We have a building there, and we certainly had the transition house, which was and the other home up there that were both considered to be necessary for public purposes, for well-being of our community. And so, I mean, if we want to have staff to come back and tell us whether what we have to do with the school district, that would be something that I suppose we could do. But I'm not quite sure why we just don't go and register the covenant that should have been on that title. Tell the school board that we had, even if we don't hold the title to that property, that's all it can be used for, is for public purposes. And I don't know what covenant is on that school property. I don't know if it belongs to the provincial government again, because school property does belong to the provincial government under some circumstances. Under other circumstances, it doesn't. And so, I mean, I don't know if that lot could be subdivided and sold off by the provincial government. I'd be interested in knowing that for housing or whatever. So, I mean, I think that as we grow, we're going to need places for houses, but we're also going to need places for parks. And a place in Prince Rupert without parkland, and I'm sure this will be sometime developed into parkland, is something that I would hate to see. And it might not be a beautiful park now, but it could be a beautiful park. It certainly is a beautiful spot, and for the future. And I think that we should move forward and just declare the covenant, the section 50 or whatever it's called, the covenant on both pieces of property, with the understanding that we'd have to talk to the school board about their section. That's my preference.
Councillor Ashley, then Councillor Garon, then Councillor Cunningham, and then Mr. Mandrick, if you'd read the motion back, please. Please go ahead, Councillor Ashley.
So my original concern with perhaps waiting was more about, I guess, more of what I thought would be a courtesy kind of talk to the school district that we were doing this. After having listened to what Councillor Thorkelson said, it also reminded me of some stuff that I know about how school district property works. Right now, it's my belief that the Westview property is still underneath the school district, but the King Ed property, which used to be under the school district, got reverted to the province, and then they sold it and then did change the purposes of the land from school use to being able to be used for other things. So I guess having thought about that, I think it is something that we do have to really consider, is that if it was to revert to the province, they could then, if we do not put this covenant on there, they could then turn around and possibly sell it for housing or other things, and we need to really think about that. So I think I've actually changed my mind, and I think we should just do this. So.
Councillor Garon.
I'm still looking for a definite legal opinion, and I don't think we have one at this point in time. Is that correct?
Councillor Cunningham.
Well, we went through a public meeting, and out of that public meeting came a clear message to the council, to the city: do not touch our green areas, our parks. That came out of that meeting. Everyone was choked about it. This is public use. It doesn't matter. I don't see how even the province can take it back and change Chapter 59 on it. They're the ones that put it in there. They're only a third of the deal. There was CN, Prince Rupert, and the province. So if the covenant's on there, or the Chapter 59's on there, then let the other people fight about it. I think we should put this on there and get it over with, and then let the straws fall where they may.
Thank you. Councillor Guerin.
I'm not saying I'm against it. I just don't want to make a decision until we know exactly what all the legal avenues are that we go to do this. So
I think
I'd rather deal with it when we have those questions answered. So that's where I'm at. I really think it should be put back on there, but there's a few questions that need to be, legal questions that need to be answered, and none of us in the room are lawyers, and I'd like a complete legal opinion on it before we go ahead and make the decision.
Thank you very much. I think you're all correct. And I'm somewhat embarrassed to sit here as a mayor and think that we're running a good government when we get a letter from somebody on an agenda without adequate staff background information. So we're all sitting here spinning our thoughts and wasting our time. And I'm going to ask that this thing be tabled pending a proper report from staff so we know what the motion to table takes precedence. I'm going to suggest to you that you table this thing so that we get a proper report from staff so we know all of the options before we decide based on our own thoughts, which do not have a lot of detail and a lot of expertise on what's going on here. And I'll make the motion to table, and I hope somebody seconds it. Seconded by Councillor Guerin.
Concerning about the tabling and how we, if you do, is there any debate on a tabling motion?
No, there isn't.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded. Call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor of the motion to table. Mr. Long?
It's a resolution. Council needs to decide whether they want to table it or not.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion to table? Opposed? Okay, the motion to table fails. Mr. Mandrick, would you read the motion that's on the table, please? Or on the floor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have the original motion as moved by Councillor Guerin and seconded by Councillor Ashley is that staff prepare a report on these lots and report back to Council of all the options, including subdivision, and to check with the school district if they are in agreement with putting Chapter 59 on the property title of both Westview school lots.
Thank you. Question's been called. Those in favor? I'll vote in favor of that. Just show for the record, please, that Councillor Guerin and myself are in favor. Those opposed? Please show for the record that the remainder of Council, with the exception of Councillor Carlick-Pearson, are opposed. I'll ask Council how they wish to resolve this matter. Councillor Ashley.
I'm going to move that we put Chapter 59 on lots 1 and 2. I think that's close enough to what it means.
Without asking the school district?
Well, I think that we can let the school district know, but at the end of the day, after having thought of what I was remembering with other things, I think it's something that we just need to do, and whether or not we tell them ahead of time or we tell them after really isn't going to make any difference.
I'll second it.
Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Kenny. Discussion. Councillor Ashley, then Councillor Guerin.
One of the reasons that I'm making this, and the thing is that I believe that these things should be on, the covenant should be on those parcels. But I also, and I have to admit, I didn't go back. I've read the report that Councillor Thorkelson was referring to, but I didn't go back to it when this was coming up. I could have, and in that report, I really think that the legal information was there. So I guess I do take exception. I think that staff did provide us with the information. It was within our ability to look back at those things. I know I didn't look back at those things. But I think that staff did give us a report that we could look at, and we could have asked questions beforehand. So,
Councillor Garon.
I guess my concern is that we do this properly. So I'm just looking for a legal way of doing this the proper way, and I really think we should have consulted with the school district. They do have a piece of a building on that property, just to give them a chance to, just say we consulted with them. I don't know whether it would sway what we're going to do with this, but it's just a courtesy to make sure we talk to them first.
Well, it's a better policy than trying to run off everybody's memory here. Any further comments? Councillor Thorkelson.
Yeah, I'm not trying to run off memory. I took some time to dig this out of my files and read it, and it was very clear in here, all through here, all of the correspondence that was happening is that the Westview Park blocks 1 and 2, parcel 4, were to be covered by the covenant. It's so very clear here. It's just there's not a letter where it says that it would not be covered. And so I really think that if there's some, we should do it. And when we talk to the lands titles or whoever we have to talk to, if they say there's a problem, then we're going to have to resolve that legal problem at that time. But I don't want to spend a lot of money and a lot of time getting a report when Mr. Horn did such an incredibly thorough report here. I don't think there's much more we could find out. Put the covenant on it, and if there's problems with doing it, then staff can certainly bring those problems back to us. And if at that time we need to talk to a lawyer or whatever, we can do it at that time once we know what the problems are. And the other thing is that I would expect that staff, unless somebody from the school board is listening, I would expect that staff would be talking to the school board, and if they had any issues, they could still come back and talk to us, and we can have a look if there's some real issues that they may have, but they may be just as happy to have that covenant on it as well. So, I think that, can always come back if this raises some concerns, and we can deal with the concerns that need to be raised. But I think that we need to go forward and just attempt to do the thing that was supposed to have been done many, many years ago. And if it had been done at that time, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Thank you.
Last comments. Councillor Cunningham? No question. Question's been called. Those in favour? Those opposed? Please show for the record that I'm opposed on a procedural basis. Obviously, Councillor Garon agrees. There's additional items tonight. The first one is item 11A. It's NAV Canada position termination. Just before we discuss this, I'll give you some background that the Prince Rupert Airport Authority was aware of this about 3 to 4 weeks ago. And when I heard about it, I asked Mr. Long to get a hold of the airport manager. The airport managers in both Digby Island Airport, Prince Rupert Airport, Digby Island, and Prince Rupert Airport, Seal Cove, to discuss the matter to see if there was some way that we could counter this change of service level. And it's interesting that it comes about at a time when in 6 to 8 months from now we could be expecting a lot more aircraft traffic here. And so once again, as I've said in the past, here we are suffering a reduction in service when in reality in the next number of months we're going to be looking for improved safety and improved ways for access and egress. But Council is certainly free to discuss the matter and decide what they'd like to do. That's just the background. Councillor Ashley.
Well, I have to admit I don't know much about like what this service does, but I know that it's important to our airport, and I found out about it first through the article that was in the Northern View, and I asked for this to be put up. I'm sure that somebody else would have put it forward if I hadn't asked for it to be on there. I really think that with something like this, when we look at our airport as being a really important thing, the safety of the people in our airport being very important, when they take away a position like this that, you know, I think affects people's safety, it's a concern, especially when we're looking at potential growth in our area, and our premier touts us as being, you know, Northern Gateway, and we want to have this kind of image, and yet we're pulling back positions. I'm going to let other people talk about it, but I am looking that we would probably be sending some sort of letter to various ministers and or MLA MPs and things, but I would like to hear what other people have to say that maybe know a little bit more about it than I do.
Certainly. The question at the end of the discussion is whether or not council just wants to send a letter or whether they want to wait for possibly some relevant information from the managers of facilities. Mr. Long, you're an aviator. What do you know about flight services?
A fair amount. Flight service, flight service specialists who work for NAV Canada are the individuals that keep track of the movements of aircraft in a particular designated zone, of which we have two. One is at the floatplane base, and the other one is over at the airport. Basically that NAV Canada has been consolidating their workforce to a number of different centralized locations and reduce the number of staff throughout the province and probably throughout the country. I don't know about the country, but throughout the province. Clearly most pilots take the view, and I think it's fair to say that with less eyes on the weather, less eyes and on what's going on with in terms of traffic movements and issues around other site-specific issues to the location that they're working in, safety can be and would theoretically at least be reduced as a result of the reduction in the labor force. But I'm sure there are other points of view with respect to that. I'd be happy to hear them, but that certainly as a pilot would be my view.
Thank you. Councillor Garon, then Councillor Cunningham.
I had a question for the manager at the airport. When I found out about it, was one of the questions was, can we hire our own flight services people, or do we have to go through NAV Canada? Not that we have any money for that, but
Mr. Long.
No, it's clearly a federal jurisdiction, and that is that speaks to the heart of the issue of aviation, which is clearly a federal jurisdiction. So no, we would not be able to actually manage that under our legislative framework.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, flight services down in Cow Bay. The airport's one issue. Cow Bay, or Seal Cove, I should say. Sorry. Maybe we'll put Cow Bay on the map too. But Seal Cove Aerodrome down there right now has the seaplanes. It has helicopters. In the last year, the helicopters down there have doubled or tripled the number of flights, and they're going to only get busier. I talked to one of the principals in Skeena Helicopters, which is the First Nations as well. They're talking about bringing in at least 2 or 3 more helicopters in the next few months. That is an area that is a little bit of a thorn for NAV Canada because they don't get fees from the float planes or the helicopters like they do from the commercial flights at the airport. It is probably the largest share of their work down there, coordinating it. I've been in our Coast Guard helicopters when they check in, and they will say there's a beaver at blah 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 and at this altitude and everything else. They will not have that information. You're going to be on a visual when you're doing it after that. And I know some of the principals are concerned about it. I made some phone calls this morning back to Ottawa to the union that's in charge of these guys about it, and I'd like to see the city send letters to numerous people about this and start the ball rolling. And I know I know some of the principals in Skeena are quite concerned about it also. I spoke to them yesterday about it when I found out about it. And so we'll get a lot of support from the community as well as First Nations on this.
Thank you. I know from past experience that Transport Canada was quite surprised when we used to have, although we had more seaplane traffic, we didn't have as much helicopter traffic that you're now speaking of. It seems that the rotary wing is emerging over the fixed wing in terms of activity, but they were always surprised about the number of landings and takeoffs that were generated at Seal Cove Airport in a year. Councillor Thorkelson.
I think that we should send a letter, and I think that Councillor Cunningham is correct to send it to as many agencies as we can. I know that one of the places we should send it to is to the Senate committee that did the hearings on the lighthouses. If you read the Senate committee report on lighthouses, one of the which we all think, which I think anyway, as being a marine issue for boats, was actually a bigger issue for the floatplane travel. And one of the major reasons that the Senate used was because of the extensive floatplane travel on the North Coast, that they should continue to have manned or crewed, peopled lighthouses. Because then the pilots could call into the lighthouses and ask what exactly the local weather was right around that lighthouse. And so, I heard ex-councillor Ken Cote on the radio this morning. He's being interviewed by CBC. And, I think if we need to maybe ask somebody with any kind of expertise, we should ask Councillor Cote to come back. But I would not want to put this motion off until the end of June to and ask what Councillor Cote said. He basically said that that if all we had was the traffic going into the main airport, the scheduled flights there are scheduled and probably wouldn't be a problem, he said, but that the flights coming in out of Seal Cove, both fixed wing and helicopters, are increasing, and he talked exactly about the increasing numbers that we've noted here of helicopters, and he's saying the same thing, that we have more and more helicopter traffic as well as fixed wing traffic, and that during the summertime it's a terrible time. He says just a terrible time to be stopping that traveling now, because during the summertime there's a zillion flights with people going out to fishing grounds, lodges, etc. And that's what ex-councillor Cote was saying, and I think that's a real concern. Of course, I do my flying in the wintertime, and I would be very concerned not to know when I'm in the middle of fog going up and down or looking for a hole to get through the fog or mist to land in Prince Rupert, that there's not be another plane that somebody hasn't called in, so there's no coordination of flight when you don't have very much of a visual when you're going down, flying in and out of here many times. And I would really not be feeling very good in the wintertime about that either, although Mr. Cote seems to think it's not as much of a problem as I do. But I really think that we need to send a letter to as many people as we can.
Councillor Kenny, Councillor Garon, and Councillor Cunningham.
I was going to make the motion, Your Worship, that we do send this letter and contact ex-Councillor Cote and ask him of any names that he could direct us to send it to also.
So send a letter to Transport Canada.
Yes.
Right. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it, but I think
Sure.
we should send is there a possibility of sending a letter to the Senate committee or to the Senate of some kind, or because I know can I speak to this?
Certainly.
When the standing Senate committee came about the lighthouses, I went to the meeting for you because you were out of town, and I specifically invited Ken Cote and Peter Hogan, and I can't remember who else, and they were both integral for that meeting. And it was Ken's comments that really struck with the senators about how he, as an aviator, he used the lighthouses really for safety, because the weather changes so quickly on the coast here that he would phone in, every 15 minutes the weather could change. So that's why he needed those eyes on those lighthouses. So I mean, I just remember they really listened to him more than they listened to the mariners. So I think, you know, Nancy Green was the senator at the time that was heading that. And
Right.
I think if we could possibly send a letter to her, because
Yeah.
those senators knew exactly what was going on our
that partic-
coastline after that. So
On that particular issue, they did refer it to a Senate committee. I'm not sure if
that was
this...
the committee that was here.
Yeah, on that particular
Yeah,
issue,
yeah.
which was lighthouses.
Mhm.
On this here, I'm not sure if it's gone to the Senate. Mr. Long, do you know where it is in the process?
No, I believe it's an internal issue for NAV Canada
Okay,
at the moment.
thank you. Councillor, so
From what I understand,
there's been, excuse me, there's a motion that's been moved and seconded. Speaking to the motion, Councillor Cunningham.
I agree with the motion, but I'd like to get that letter sent to as many agencies as possible, and not just federal agencies, but provincial, because Christy Clark has been flogging LNG in this area for so long. This could inhibit some of her ambitions, whether we agree with them or not. So we might get support there. I also would like to see the letter sent to the Union of Canadian Transportation Employees, President, and whoever anyone else can think of. I think it's pertinent we get this out as fast as possible to as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ashley, then Councillor Cunningham.
Yeah, I was going to speak to exactly that, but I think it's in line with what the motion is if we just put it to other agencies. Some other ones that I think that we should be sending it to, so we've already mentioned the Premier, but I think on top of the Premier, we should probably be sending it to the LNG Minister, Rich Coleman, because of the, you know, that effect on the proposed projects. Probably also, even though it's out of the provincial jurisdiction, but to Todd Stone, our Transportation Minister, because maybe he can advocate on our behalf. And Nathan Cullen was another one that I thought we should send this to.
Certainly, perhaps the communities on Haida Gwaii,
Yep.
as well as Kitkatla, Lac Walams, and Hartley Bay. Councillor Garon.
So could we get stakeholders involved in this as well, such as the pilots as well as maybe the LNG companies, but since they're the ones that are you know, responsible for the increase in activity really for helicopters, and I think the port maybe should be on board with us as well.
Certainly, whatever you'd like to include in the motion.
Just as many, I mean, just get staff to get as many people as possible.
Let's see how Mr. Mandrick's wordsmith this all. Mr. Mandrick, who are we sending this to?
Thank you, Your Worship.
It's okay, your probation period's over, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got moved by Councillor Kinney and seconded by Councillor Garon that Council have staff send a letter of support in keeping NAV Canada positions rather than eliminating any further roles due to safety concerns surrounding increased air traffic needs to Transport Canada, Nancy Green, former Councillor Cote, all federal and provincial bodies that could add value to the President of the Union of Transportation Employees, the Premier, Rich Coleman, Todd Stone, Nathan Cullen, and surrounding First Nations groups, and the port.
The liquefied natural gas companies also. Probably take shorthand better than the media. Okay, I'll ask council's... yes, please go ahead, Councillor.
I'm not going to add somebody to that list, although maybe our MLA might be a good one. But what I want to do is suggest that we need to send, I think we should send one right away. Yeah. Then I think we should send a second one that all the communities sign on to. So because there's no use sending a letter to Kitkatla, we should just ask them to sign on to a letter written by all the communities. And just send it to the same group of people, whoever we send it to, but also you know, get a community sign on from community. We go to community meeting on the 18th, and then try to get the port to sign on to a letter, the Port Edward, yeah, for community stuff, but also then the port and see if the port can take it around to places like Pinnacle Pellet. I'm sure they fly in and out, and then maybe we can take it to the LNG staff, can phone the Derek and Herb and see if they can go through their food chain and see who can sign up from there, so that we just send one letter from the city right away, so that somebody has protested it, and then send another letter that everybody signed on to. Would that make sense, Your Worship?
Certainly. I'll ask council how they wish to deal with the matter. It's been moved and second. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. The other item here, increased tax ratio for heavy industry, has been referred to city staff. So after that, we have reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Are there any report? Go ahead, please, Councillor Ashley.
I was just looking through the information package from June 4th, and I noticed there was a thing from Northern Health on legacy grants, and I was thinking this would be a good, because it's about healthy communities, and it's in conjunction with the Winter Games, and they're looking for people to apply, and I was thinking that this might be a good thing to forward maybe to the Rec Commission. In terms of, I'm not sure if the staff at the recreation complex has looked at this yet, but there's opportunities to get funding for things that, it could be for injury prevention, tobacco-free communities, healthy eating, active living, heal your heart, prevention of problematic substance abuse, HIV prevention, harm reduction. It's got a bunch of different things, but I thought it might fit in with the Rec Commission under like the active living and type of thing.
Certainly, it's worth trying. Mr. Long, would you please see that the Recreation Director gets that information for the next Recreation Commission agenda? The last time they did this, I was involved with other individuals in the community trying to get something so we could have an evening where we could have speakers come in over a meal and discuss men's health, particularly for men that are getting older. And for whatever reason, it didn't fit the criteria, but that's no reason why we shouldn't continue to try. Perhaps the Rec Commission through Healthy Living will have something else. Other questions, comments? None at all? Certainly, please go ahead.
This is just my usual beginning of salmon season announcement. We do hope it's going to be a great salmon season, but it starts tomorrow on the Nass. And the Gillnetters are coming into town slowly, dribbling in, and we're hoping that they're going to be a good showing of early Nass sockeye. It is a sockeye year this year, and so we're hoping that our plants are booming. And the Fraser River is supposed to have somewhere between 7 million and 70 million. And but they're telling us that we can go to individual transferable quotas, which is based on a pre-season analysis of what you can catch. So the closest they can come between 7 and 70 million. I'm not exactly too worried, but anyway, where that fish will come up here for canning, and so we would hope that we would, if we have 23 million, which is what they are expecting, that we will see a great deal of that come up in the end of August and September for canning on the North Coast to keep our canneries going. So it might be another good year, as we had a good year last year with the pink salmon that were North Coast pink salmon. Well, should have a good year here for hopefully for sockeye if the fish cooperate.
With that sort of return, it would be a great opportunity to have the cannery work right into the end of September, if not a week or two longer. Yeah. If there's nothing further, I'll give the Mayor's report. I spoke with representatives of the Canadian National Railway who advised that they are supporting this year's Seafest celebrations. It's the 100th anniversary of the railway to this part of Canada. And this year's CN will provide banners which will be displayed in the city and are sponsoring a miniature rail train that children can ride on during the Seafest events. I participated in a discussion with Minister John Rustad about the proposed liquefied natural gas export opportunities on lands within the region. Also some of the federal, provincial, and Aboriginal government opportunities in British Columbia. Locally, the treaty process has been restarted from some years ago when it stopped, and discussions are now continuing, certainly around land use and future opportunity. I participated in a North and Central Coast Ferry Advisory Committee meeting. BC Ferries provided information about the ferries operating on the new revised schedule. For Route 10, Prince Rupert to Port Hardy, they have found that the vessel is increasing its loads. Reduced service has shifted the vehicle and passenger traffic to the new service. The ferry trips are almost filled to capacity, though they have not got into the summer schedule yet. The vessel is being filled with traffic not from Prince Rupert to Port Hardy, but from Prince Rupert to Clem II and Bella Bella, the mid-coast community ports. BC Ferries will not increase the scheduled number of trips, but it may have to stop in at these mid-coast communities more often to accommodate those needing service. They will continue to monitor the use of the vessel capacity with their new schedule and try to accommodate. The North and Central Coast Ferry Advisory Committee will review the per-trip information in October. I attended the graduation ceremony for the graduating students from Charles Hayes Secondary School and provided congratulations and best wishes on behalf of City Council and our residents. I participated in a meeting with the Honourable Greg Rickford for the Government of Canada, Ministry of Natural Resources. The Minister is interested in the West Coast liquefied natural gas export opportunities. Also discussed with the Minister were the city's concerns regarding a black liquor spill last year at Watson Island involving the federal government ministry. Further, we discussed increasing vessel traffic at the port, aids to navigation, and the recent notice of closure of our flight service station. The Minister and his staff took notes on these matters and will look into them. Our communities of Prince Rupert and Port Ed are some 6 months away from a large influx of construction activity and workers. It's not time to reduce flight services to aircraft. The Prince Rupert Airport Authority reported that passenger aircraft traffic numbers are up by 5% over last January. I attended the opening of the Eco Trust Canada-sponsored Fisheries Observer Training Program and offered words of encouragement to the participants from this region. Councillor Carlick Pearson was also in attendance. I attended the open house which was held by the British Columbia Assessment Office concerning the Spectra Energy proposed West Coast Connector gas transmission project. The gas line would connect to the proposed BG Group liquefied natural gas terminal on Ridley Island. And I attended the Rising Above Healing Conference, which is an annual national conference held this year in Prince Rupert, and provided a welcome to the city and best wishes on behalf of City Council and our residents. I met with the Royal Canadian Navy commander for our region, who advised that the Navy dive tender vessel is working in the area and will be available for viewing by the public during the 2014 Seafest celebrations. And the city's Parks and Recreation Department is sending out the Summer Active Living and Community Resource Guide, and it should be arriving at local residents after tomorrow, which is after June the 10th. And this summer at Diana Lake there will be a kids camp, which is a sailing school, and the information is in the guide. The sailing school is for ages 6 to 14 years. And also this week at the Recycling Center, the area to accept goods on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis is under construction. The last item I have, we just received today on very short notice, and it's a community message, and that is that tomorrow, which is Tuesday, June the 10th at 8:30 a.m., the Prince Rupert Detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to honor their fellow slain RCMP members in Moncton, will be holding a Red Surge March, which will take place by the local RCMP officers going down McBride Street to 3rd Avenue West, then to 4th Street, and finally to 2nd Avenue and up McBride, to be completed by 9 a.m. So once again, there will be a Red Surge March by members of the local Royal Canadian Mounted Police Detachment, and it'll start at 8:30 a.m. That concludes my comments. There's nothing further from our staff. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to mention that on your behalf, I represented you at the opening of Andre's new building, and it was really great, along with Constable Barry Cunningham and Councillor Barry Cunningham and Councillor Gina Garon. It was a real nice evening, and they appreciated us coming.
Good, good. And actually, the latest business to get into operation here in Prince Rupert is a hearing clinic. Industrial hearing and hearing aids, etc. Before everybody turns into a comic here, if there's nothing further, I'll have a motion to adjourn. Or Councillor, thank you. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Not Constable Cunningham, Councillor Cunningham. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. This meeting stands adjourned.